back to the Boropolis podcast. It feels like a while since we've sat down and done one of these, Nathan. The last game that we discussed was Stoke, which feels like an eternity ago after two games and thousands of miles travelled from a load of Middlesbrough fans. Obviously, we are now ready to discuss all of that. I will hold my hands up. This is partially my fault that we're a bit late this week. I've been abroad, if you couldn't tell from my glowing skin that I've picked up in Tenerife, Nathan. I basically put the wrong laptop in my bag, and that pretty much meant that I couldn't edit the podcast. And so if you're annoyed and you think, there might be some people thinking that it's actually a bonus that they haven't had to listen to us drivel on about Middlesbrough for an extra few days. But if you are annoyed, then the blame's on me. Nathan, so much to get into, so we'll keep it short and sweet. No Rud's game this week for those that might be interested. Another postponement. But how was your week and a bit been since that Stoke game?
Yeah, not so bad, Chris. Just underway with uni, smashing through that. Hopefully, knocking a few deadlines on the head before it comes to them. But yeah, not so bad. What about yourself? How was your holiday?
Yeah, do you know what? Very nice, thank you. Enjoyed it. Enjoyed, especially when the weather has turned in the last probably 3 weeks in England, where it's getting to that stage where it really is freezing on a morning. You wake up and it's dark, and it's just that sort of miserable time in England. So, a couple of days in the sun, I must say. Well, thankfully, I'm not doing the podcast with sort of no shirt on, but my goodness, I have severely burnt my shoulders. So if you're watching on YouTube and you just see my face look as though I'm in excruciating pain, then it might just be a case of that, really. But apart from that, Nathan, a lovely few days with my mum and dad. Really enjoyed it. But now, back to the nitty gritty. Of course, in that period, I did watch the Plymouth game via a stream, and of course, watched the Exeter game as well before I went away. So, going back a little bit, it feels like a while now, doesn't it? The Exeter game, it isn't sort of our usual way of doing things, Nathan, but I feel like because of the cup draw, we've got to just address the elephant in the room. Obviously, everyone knows by now that we progressed past Exeter, and the draw that everyone wanted, apart from it being at home, was pulled out of the hat, really. Port Vale versus Middlesbrough in the quarterfinals of the Carabao Cup, a chance to progress to the semi-finals. Obviously, we'll talk about the game and some of the standout performances from that, but skipping ahead a little bit, the draw. Look, there's still a lot of typical Boro to happen potentially just yet, but in terms of what Middlesbrough fans were wishing for, I think a lot of them got the wish.
Oh, look, it's by far the easiest draw that you could have got. Any team that was left in was looking at Port Vale and thinking that's your easiest way of progression. But then again, from a Port Vale perspective, whilst they'll be a little bit fuming that they haven't got a Premier League side in the quarterfinals, the furthest they've ever been in the competition, were the easiest opponent for them as well. So it sort of evens out that way, I suppose. But yeah, Port Vale in the next round of the Carabao Cup, the quarterfinals, the last eight. And look, it's another round as that pool of teams gets smaller and smaller where you avoid the big guns, and it's a real chance of progression. But in mine and your lifetime, Chris, we've seen the Cardiff FA Cup game. We've seen us only a few years ago be at this stage of the Carabao Cup and get dumped out at home to Burton Albion with Aidan Flint missing a header from 2 yards. So, as you mentioned, there's a lot of typical Boro that could happen. But yeah, it's really nice to have Port Vale in the next round. As the draw was being done, of course, the game the draw followed Manchester United 0, Newcastle United 3, and I felt like it was going to be written in the stars a little bit. As that pool keeps getting smaller, I think it is slowly getting closer towards that, unfortunately. But yeah, it's nice that we've avoided them once again, and hopefully Chelsea do the business in the next round.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a certain section of Middlesbrough when it comes down to a cup draw that really, really want to take on Newcastle. And I think just in their heart believe that we've got an upset in us and a real sort of, I guess Newcastle fans, if it's not a derby of Sunderland fans, it won't beat the Newcastle, but plenty of Middlesbrough fans that eye it up as a derby and think, we can do them, we can do them. But given where I live, it would just be living hell if they did absolutely tonk us. So to be honest, I'm just trying to hope that if we do progress, we avoid them because, yeah, I mean, let's face it, as much as no one wants them to, they have got quite a decent team. And yeah, that would be pretty painful, especially for me. But yeah, Nathan, obviously to get to the stage where we will be playing Port Vale, we had to play Exeter. And in the first game of the trip to Devon, it was, one of those games where it had all of the potentials of a huge banana skin cup upset, lower league opposition, an absolutely disgusting night weather-wise, Middlesbrough in a white kit. I mean, all of the feelings of Newport under Tony Pulis were sort of deep in the pit of my stomach when the game kicked off. But actually, we weren't even playing in a white kit. We were playing in a blue and yellow kit. But, I mean, my mind was going elsewhere there, Nathan. So, yeah, apologies. I'm thinking of the Plymouth game already. But anyway, similar feelings weather-wise and obviously lower league opposition. As I say, it had all the potential to be a real upset. And despite the opposition doing their best by having their goal of the season competition during the game, we managed to battle on through and get the job done, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Think everyone was sort of in the same boat prior to the game. Of none of the Carabao Cup games have been streamed prior to this round, so everyone was looking at channels from abroad trying to find a stream of the game, and the one that I found was actually really good, so I was quite pleased with that. But yeah, I got a perfect viewing of Ryan Trevitt's first goal of the game, absolute worldie, and his second was as well. Yes, you go into the break 1-0 down, and regarding the first half performance, I thought we were incredibly poor. Didn't create any chances really of note, apart from Silvera having a shot from about 25 yards out in stoppage time at the end of the first half.
Yeah.
Really, really poor. But my hope was that they'd receive somewhat of a rocket from Carrick at half time, which of course he's not really used to doing. But yeah, come out for the second half and hopefully get back into the game as quickly as possible and then go on and win the tie. And yeah, we got that goal relatively quickly after half time with Rodgers. Bangura is pretty influential in the goal because he's going down that left hand side, his cross is sort of cut out, the ball starts bouncing around to a few Exeter players. Bangura does really well to get back in, nicks the ball off an Exeter player, just as he's about to clear the ball. And yeah, Rodgers shifts onto that right foot and launches one at the top corner, which, yeah, it was nice to see Boro respond with as good of a goal as Exeter's first. And then it continued with Silvera on that right hand side coming in and bending one in that far corner again. Two really, really good goals individually from a Middlesbrough perspective. And once we'd gone 2-1 up, I did feel that we'd be fine as it was. And then with probably Exeter's only chance really of the second half, Trevitt again hits a shot. I think that this one's slightly deflected off McNair. But yeah, it arrows into that top corner. Hackney gave the ball away in that instance. And yeah, it felt like the tide could turn once again. But Boro did really well. Got back in control, won the penalty. Trevitt turned from hero to zero by, I mean, it's embarrassing what he does, really. I have no idea what he's doing. Rodgers is pretty much caught underneath the ball on the penalty spot. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to do anything with it. And as he jumps to head the ball, Trevitt pulls his shirt and Latte Lath takes the penalty. Nice to see, really. The centre forward have a little bit of balls about him to put his neck on the line with the game 2-2 and step up and take the penalty. And I think any penalty that goes in is a good penalty. But had this one been saved, then yeah, it really would have been a poor one because it's not really in the corner, just to the keeper's left-hand side of the middle of the goal. And yeah, Boro sail through to the next round, which is really nice. And yeah, credit to those Boro fans that travelled down and back on that Tuesday night, because the weather was truly, truly horrendous, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was disgusting, as you say. Very fortunate in this round of the cup that certain broadcasters around the globe picked it up, and obviously that enabled a few Middlesbrough fans to watch the game that weren't in attendance. The less said about that, though, obviously, sometimes you just stumble across these things on the internet. But yeah, as you say, Middlesbrough progressed, and actually, again, like you mentioned earlier, I don't think we played very well in the first half at all. Not that I particularly thought that Exeter sort of deserved to be in the lead, because as you say, it was a bit of a worldie. A few people sort of mentioned Glover's involvement and sort of said, well, he kind of just stands there and watches it go over him. But it's an unbelievable strike, isn't it? I mean, if he pull... The thing is, excuse me, a few people sort of questioned him. But then in the same breath, if he pulls off a save from that strike, you say it's an absolute worldie save. So I don't really know what people are expecting from him there, to be honest. But yeah, I felt we tried to walk the ball in a little bit in the first half. It was becoming quite annoying, actually. A few times, Dan Barlaser had the ball sort of on the edge of the 18-yard box and was trying to play neat passes. And of course, when a team's in a low block, and in this instance, Exeter was sitting fairly deep and trying to soak up a little bit of pressure. You kind of sometimes have to either rely on a little bit of luck or an absolute defence splitting pass that is the sort of key to unlocking their back line. And unfortunately, they just weren't coming off. And as you say, the only real sort of chance where you thought, oh, you can get a shot off here was Silvera, really. And he fired that one over the bar, didn't he? So, yeah, I think whatever Carrick sent them in the second half, it clearly worked. A lot more direct play in our approach. As you say, Silvera and Rodgers just being a little bit more sort of courageous with the ball, not really minding too much, getting at players and thinking, well, we need to progress ourselves up the pitch somehow. So if I try and take on a few or play a pass that might not look on, but if I can get it through, then it gives us a real chance then, or even a shot in both their cases, then we'll reap the rewards for that. And we certainly did. And yeah, I mean, as I say, there was so many sort of little parts of the game where you thought, oh, this could really turn. As you say, when we got in front of, I thought, we've done the hard part now, just be sensible for a little bit, and then we can see the game out. And obviously, as you say, it's another worldie, a slight deflection, and you think home fans are going to be absolutely delighted with that. Of course, the whole atmosphere can turn. But thankfully, we didn't allow that to happen. And as you say, nerves of steel from Latte Lath to put us back in front from the penalty spot. And it's becoming quite interesting that actually we haven't started historically fantastically under Carrick's leadership after half time. And at the moment, or in this season anyway, we seem to be a bit of a second half team. I think I heard a stat earlier this week where had the Championship League table, of course, hypothetically, been based off just second half games, then Middlesbrough would be sitting third. I mean, it shocked me a little bit because of the fact that it feels to me, at least, that there's been a trend of conceding quite early on in the second half of games. But perhaps, obviously we score quite a lot in the second half as well. A bit of an interesting one that I must admit shocked me. But yeah, as I say, Nathan, just happy to get through. And again, I'll do what I have done throughout every other round. I'm firmly on board the cup train now. The fair weather sort of cup fan nature that I was absolutely openly speaking about earlier on this season has firmly been thrown onto the scrap heap, and now I'm absolutely on board for a potential trip to Wembley. So, yeah, I mean, I probably deserve a bit of stick for that, but I'm owning it. So, Nathan, listen, at least I'm not shying away from it. Obviously, after such a frantic game during the week and some real standout performances, I think Morgan Rogers was the real standout from that game. I must admit, I was probably expecting him to come into the team, perhaps against Plymouth. But again, we saw Michael Carrick go with his tried and tested. And again, I was listening to the Northern Echo, You Are My Boro podcast. And I think it was Dom Shaw that had said, Michael Carrick, if you're a player in his team, it's probably harder to lose your place in his team than to actually win a place in his team, if that makes sense. And he's so right, because even the criticism that the likes of Josh Corbyn's got, obviously Crooks a few weeks back was getting an awful lot of stick for some of his performances. Even, look, Engel's been very solid, but he found his way back in, and then he's been consistently good. Vandenberg's had his critics. But as I say, once you're in, unless you really are horrendous, you're in. And he proved that again at Plymouth. And yeah, after one mental game, we just got an absolute other completely mental game again, Nathan, at the weekend.
Yeah, we did. It's like goals galore this podcast this week. But yeah, 3-3 draw away at Plymouth Argyle. The team flew back from Exeter on the Tuesday night and then flew back to Plymouth on the Friday afternoon before the game. But yeah, this one was always going to be a difficult one. We spoke on the last podcast about what Plymouth would bring, what the league table possibly doesn't suggest really regarding their position. Spoke about a few key players, particularly their wide men, who I suppose came to the fore a little bit in this game. And yeah, it was always going to be a very difficult game, going to home park as well. A ground that in recent years has been notoriously difficult to go to. And yeah, before the game, I would have taken a point. I said it on last week's podcast that I would have taken a point. However, as the game progressed through different stages of it, it sort of leaves me a little bit disappointed that we didn't get all 3 points in the end. I think the goals that we conceded, all of them are avoidable, really. But then again, from a Plymouth perspective, our goals are avoidable for them. But yeah, I think one of the sort of cliche things is that a lot of managers will say is that to score 3 goals away from home and not win the game is pretty poor, really. And yeah, I'd be inclined to agree, because the goals that we conceded were poor. I think particularly the second and the third are really sort of, you look at them and think they're so easily avoidable. In the instance of the second, just go and close his ass down. Like there's 2 players there. Vandenberg doesn't close him down, and Howson's just stood there doing nothing. Deeper than Vandenberg, not following anyone, just stood in that space. Neither get out to impact us as he just is able to get his shot off. And I mean, in fairness, there's no taking away from the shot. It beats Dieng because it goes right in that top corner. It's a great strike, but you've got to get out there and affect him. And then the third goal that we concede, of course, at the time, we're 3-2 up in the game, and it's Plymouth's only effort on our goal of note in that second half, full 45-minute period, and it's not even a shot; it's a cross.
Yeah,
And those goals particularly frustrate me when it's a cross that goes all the way through, because someone just has to deal with it. I don't care if it's a defender or if it's the goalkeeper to come and claim the cross or tip it around the post. But I hate it. It's not necessarily a thing to point at Dieng, but it's just a thing that I hate when those crosses go all the way through and the keeper just dives, although he knows he's never getting there, he just dives for effect. Really, really frustrate me. But yeah, as mentioned, would have taken a point before the game, but a little bit disappointed the way that we conceded our goals. And yeah, a little bit frustrated just because on the balance of play, we were the better side.
yeah, yeah. And I think, as you said, a typical manager post match in a game like this is, we've scored 3 goals away from home and we haven't come away with 3 points. Of course, they're going to be frustrated, but I think what will frustrate Michael Carrick even more, and I think has done a lot of people, is the fact that we've led twice in the game. And typically under Michael Carrick, when we've led, we've pretty much gone on to seal a win. And yeah, after leading twice, and I think what was so sort of frustrating as well was the fact that if you watch the game, as you say in the second half, that is the equaliser for Plymouth. That is their only notable I say chance. It wasn't really a chance. It's their only notable sort of moment in the second half, almost in an attacking aspect. And we worked so hard. Greenwood obviously on the score sheet again, and yeah, it's just incredibly frustrating. And I think when you look at the context of the upcoming fixtures as well, we've got such a difficult period coming up, factoring in that Leicester game, and then also after the international break, you look at the fixtures and you think, yeah, we're testing ourselves against the best, and of course we want to pick up points in those games. But if you win the Plymouth game and then you get beat off Leicester, not that it's okay, but it's a little bit more sort of, you look at it and you think, well, at least we picked up all 3 against Plymouth. Whereas now, yes, okay, we got something from the game, but given the context, even Michael Carrick himself said the game feels like a defeat. And now, if we then get beat off Leicester and then following the international break, all of these difficult games coming up, after putting together such a strong run, you don't almost want to kill the momentum of what we had, I suppose. And the Stoke game, look, that's been and gone now. It ended the run, but sort of we almost got back on the horse straight away with the Exeter game. And in this league, you've got to build momentum and go on runs like that, especially when you've had a start like we have. So I was about to say to lose in the manner that we did, to draw the game in the manner that we did, as you say, incredibly, incredibly frustrating. Something I did want to mention, actually, we put out a little bit of a jokey graphic that we put out after the Watford game. The Butcher for Josh Coburn. Credit to Michael Manning, our wonderful graphic designer. But yeah, following Chris Wilder, I think it was, that first brought it to light. Josh Coburn's parents are actually owner butchers in Richmond. So we played on that a little bit. We weren't sort of doing the whole pathetic thing of the Losandro Martinez butcher sort of gimmick that he's got going on, which is really embarrassing. But yeah, obviously back on the score sheet, and following watching the game, I think there was still confusion as to whether the first goal was his. I thought for dramatic effect, even though there was still sort of a little bit of a question mark around if he had scored or not. Bit of alliteration, a brace for the butcher. The goal has now been given as a Plymouth own goal, and I don't really have the heart to change the caption on any of the posts on social media. So, in our eyes, Josh Coburn got a brace, Nathan.
Yeah, I think it's fair to call it that, if I'm honest. For the first, he does really well to get across that front post. It's one of those runs that I love to see strikers make, getting across that front post, getting across his defender and getting that shot away. And okay, I think he does actually make first contact on the ball and then it goes in off the Plymouth defender. But for me, it's a Coburn goal really, because of his movement for that. And then, of course, the penalty in the second half. It's a fortunate one, in the way that it ricochets back to him. But I think this one, strangely, as we've talked about, as I sort of mentioned, Lat's penalty, that it's a good penalty because it's gone in. I actually think that Coburn's penalty was probably better than Lat's in a way that it was down low in that
Yeah,
corner. But Cooper does well, guesses the right way, makes the save, and it's similar to Ross Stewart's penalty that he scored against us last year, where Stefan makes the save and it just rebounds along the line, and it's an easy tap in from a yard. But yeah, it was always going to happen that Josh Coburn was going to be on the score sheet against Plymouth Argyle, obviously the side that he was going to join on loan in the summer transfer window. It was almost written in the stars that he'd get a goal or two in this game. And it was probably his best game in a while in terms of his runs and his overall play in the game. Of course, to score 1.5 goals in the game is also good. But yeah, I thought he was relatively impressive in the game against a really sort of difficult task in terms of playing for a back four in the first half, and then they changed to a back three later on in the second half before Lat came on. But yeah, I thought he had a pretty good game. Regarding a few of the players in the attacking trio behind him in the first half, I didn't think that many of them showed up really. I think you'd argue that Jones is the one that gets on the ball most often because we try and force it down that right side more than the left. Um, but then the goal, the third goal that we score in the game, pretty much, well, all of them feature in the goal, and they all link up really well. Jones's ball to Crooks down that side is magnificent. Crooks does really well to have the awareness to pick out Greenwood, and it's a good finish, side footed with his left foot. Um, but yeah, I think that with one more game before the international break, yes, we have got a really difficult fixture run following this 2 week break. But my hope is that we get a few of the injured lads back, because I think that possibly you can see fatigue setting in on a few players now, and you could really do with a Riley McGree or a Marcus Force to come in at the side and offer that option. So yeah, I think that a point I was going to say was fair. I don't think it was fair, really. I thought that we should have won that game. Um, and if we had, it would have set us up really nicely to go into Leicester on Saturday, who had been beaten the day before on the Friday night by Leeds at home, only the second defeat of the season. But yeah, we'll have to take a draw into that game and see what Saturday brings.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, obviously on that front sort of four. If you're going to throw Coburn and the three behind him into it, and yeah, I do think you're right. I think I mentioned it in a previous podcast. And listen, Isaiah Jones in that few game spell during the winning streak, he's really getting back to himself in terms of his. You can see the confidence that he's playing with at the moment. But I think even when he is playing with confidence, we know at the best of times his end product can be a little bit sort of erratic, which I think would be fair. But again, we use him that much that if you give him the ball that many times, eventually he's going to get it right. And in this circumstance, the pass to Crooks is when he does get it right and a goal comes from it. So, yeah, I think it's more just a case of having options. Obviously, Marcus Force is a complete different option to Isaiah Jones. And then Riley McGree, who I think it would be fair to say up until his injury was our best player this season. And then even Latte Laugh, look, you look at Coburn, and that's been a huge talking point over the last few weeks. And you go into the Leicester game, and yet you perhaps look at the way Leicester play and actually think sort of tactically that having a Latte Laugh who can stretch that defence with his pace, who take a lot of risks, it might be beneficial. But then Michael Carrick, he shot me plenty of times before, but in this instance, I just don't see him dropping Coburn. So, yeah, I do know what you mean in the sense that we could do with a little bit of a injection of something else. And even, look, Morgan Rogers is still contributing. I thought he'd done really well off the bench again in the Plymouth game. Was unlucky with a great turn in the final few minutes. He just doesn't quite generate the power in his shot to trouble Plymouth's keeper. But yeah, I think the international break might come at a good time this time round because of the fact that it gives us a little bit more time to get some of these players back who, let's be honest, there would be first team regulars. And it's a good chance because when these first injuries were sort of first, we were made aware of them, they were almost just talked about as though they were going to be maybe a few weeks. It was a little knock, and they've sort of developed into a little bit more than that. We don't really have a time scale just yet, and obviously they're very important players for Middlesbrough. So we'll be hoping that they're back soon. Just lastly on the Plymouth game, before we talk about Leicester, I did want to say quite interesting that Coburn did take the penalty because obviously Greenwood won it. And watching the game, I don't know if you saw that Greenwood was desperate to take it. But obviously Howson was also on the pitch at the same time. And given that Howson had scored one already this season, do you think that's Josh Coburn saying to the captain, look, I haven't been in the goals recently. I'm working so hard for the team. I'm a striker. I want to score. Or do you think that's Johnny Howson going, you go and take it. You take the responsibility? Because I thought it was really interesting that even at Josh Coburn's age, he had the bottle to, miss the initial penalty, but gets a little bit lucky, but he scores the rebound. I just thought that was an interesting little dynamic from the game.
Yeah, possibly seeing Latte Laugh in the week step up, and I suppose have a little bit of bottle about him to step up under pressure and put the ball away. Possibly that spurs him on a little bit, playing against a club that sort of recognises talents and wanting to showcase them off, possibly. And yeah, a little bit of that as well. Hasn't really been in the goals at all this season. So yeah, possibly knew that Sky were going to take that goal off him in the first half and wanted one for himself. So yeah, possibly that as well. But yeah, good to see players looking to take responsibility in games. And yeah, it goes to show the level of trust as well from Johnny Howson and the rest of the side to put the faith in Coburn to get that goal. So yeah, really pleasing.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we've already mentioned it. The last game before the international break, the last game before what is going to be an incredibly difficult run of fixtures and a very busy one at that. It's a huge huge game for both sides, really. And it's a huge game for us in the fact that obviously the last home game at the Riverside, we were beaten against a Stoke side that seemingly have turned the corner a little bit. And for Leicester, as you say, their last league game, they were beating off Leeds, which was somewhat of a shock, I guess, for some Championship or just football fans in general, given their start to the season. They'll obviously be wanting to get back to winning ways. They've got Ipswich, who, okay, yes, they did concede last seconds of the game last night, but they're still breathing down the necks a little bit. Leeds are now turning on the gas. Southampton are starting to pick up some really late wins, and obviously that always breeds confidence. Look, you look at that Leicester team, and of course you think, wow, it's going to be a really difficult game. But Hull and Leeds have shown that they aren't some sort of unbeatable Galacticos-esque team that have just somehow ended up in the Championship. Middlesbrough can give this Leicester team a game, but by all means, it's going to be an incredibly difficult task, even at the Riverside.
Yeah, it is. I think something that should be taken into sort of consideration is, I mean, of course, we've seen the table. Leicester have won 11 out of 13 games this season. They've only sort of not picked up 6 points, as you mentioned, against Hull and Leeds. Both of those games were at the King Power. Every other game that Leicester have played away, every game Leicester have played away from home in the league this season, they've won every single game. That is remarkable, really, when you take into consideration teams in this division pride themselves on home form, really, for the most part. But yeah, of course, I'm not going to go in and sort of reel every name off from the
There's too
squad.
much to reel off, to be honest.
Exactly, there's too many to reel off. Looking at like the bench and things like that, it's absolutely ridiculous. Really, it's an embarrassment of riches for a side in the Championship, a side that had won the FA Cup 2 seasons ago. It's I suppose it's pathetic that they're in the Championship, really,
Yeah,
on their part. But they're here and they're making a mockery of the league for the most part, especially because they haven't really clicked into first gear yet. Sorry, into full gear, not first gear. But yeah, it's going to be a very difficult game. But as you mentioned earlier on regarding some players that could play in the game, they're a side that are very expansive. They want to play out from the back. They take risks. And honestly, I don't know if you watched the game on Friday against Leeds, but they could have been 2-0 down in about 2 minutes. It was honestly ridiculous, some of the risks that they were trying to play with. And had it not been for Leeds centre forwards deciding not to shoot when they're about 5 yards out, then it really could have been a bloodbath, really. But look, it's going to be a very, very difficult game, probably as difficult as you're going to get all season, really. But yeah, it's a test for what's to come in terms of the games after the break, because they come thick and fast. And the worrying part is, through our run at the start of the season, in the nicest way possible, we haven't really played anyone good yet,
yeah,
really. We in the next sort of few games, I'm just going to reel the fixtures off. I'm just going to reel the fixtures off now. So Bristol City to come after the break. Just got a new manager, Liam Manning, who had Oxford flying. Leeds away. I mean, they're on fire. Ipswich at home, on fire. Hull at home, decent enough. Swansea away, don't usually get anything there apart from last season, when we decided that we were going to smash hoodoos out the park. Port Vale in the cup, in between that Swansea away game and West Brom at home 2 days before Christmas. And then I think it's Rotherham on Boxing Day away, and then Huddersfield in the week, and then it's Coventry again. So that's in the space of a month, and I feel like I've named about 9 games there. So that's truly ridiculous, really. So as said earlier on, with the hope that a few of the injured players will be back following the break, that is sort of in anticipation of the run to come, because these boys that are currently in the side aren't going to be able to do Saturday, Tuesday for a month, I don't think.
It's going to be asking a lot, isn't it?
It is, and the games that they're going to be playing in as well are going to be really, really high intensity games. When you look at the sides that are to come, Leeds are going to try and strangle the life out of us when we go to Welling Road in a few weeks' time. Ipswich the same, and of course Leicester at the weekend, which give it our all, because then we've got 2 weeks off. So
Absolutely.
so yeah, do you want to know what I think? I'm never going to come on this podcast and say about anyone in the league that it's a free hit, because I believe that we can beat anyone in this league. The same when Burnley were here last year, and I think we sort of discussed that as a possible conversation that, oh well, is this a free hit? No game in this division's a free hit. Anyone can beat anyone. No one would have really expected that Rotherham would have got anything from Ipswich last night, but they did. So yeah, look, Leicester will be looking to bounce back after their defeat in the last game. We've got the home crowd on our side, and it would be lovely to be the first side this season that they lost away to in the division. And I believe that we've got the capabilities to do just that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, extra reason to beat them. I actually found out today, having it just not even crossed my mind, to be honest, that of course their manager scored against us in the UEFA Cup final.
Yeah, he did. He did. And I think I wouldn't usually throw out stats like this, but I'm going to, just because I think that all runs must come to an end, and we have lost finals to Leicester before mine and your lifetime, Chris, mind you, but we have lost finals to Leicester, and in our last 14 games against them, we haven't won. So all runs must come to an end
End
starting
streak.
Saturday.
End the streak. I thought, do you know what? I think that might have been the title of the last podcast. I can't remember for certain, but it was something like the end of the the end of the streak, or something like that. So maybe that can be the title for the podcast to come on. Back to our usual schedule. Monday night it will be, following hopefully a Boro victory. Fingers crossed. Yeah, that would be lovely, and a bit of payback for that goal in the UEFA Cup final. He has lost a lot of hair since then, so if you are thinking, well, he doesn't look familiar, then that's why. Yes, but I think that's us done, Nathan. Obviously, I can only apologise that we have been a little bit late this week. As I say, we'll be getting back to our usual schedule after the Leicester game, and then moving on forwards from that point. But as ever, if you've watched or listened, please do like and subscribe on your audio or YouTube platforms, whichever way you sort of tune into the podcast. And from me and Nathan, thank you ever so much for watching and listening. And that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast.